Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks also to the people joining online. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Federica Russo as our speaker today. So Federica is full professor in philosophy and ethics of technoscience at the University of Utrecht. And her research explores epistemological, methodological, and normative/ethical challenges in the health and social sciences, with a particular focus on policy context and the increasingly technological nature of these fields. Over the years, she has published extensively on topics such as causation, causal modeling, evidence, and technology. And Federica now, she's also the principal investigator and coordinator of the SOLARIS project, a project that explores the challenges of deepfakes and infodemics. And beyond her research, she also plays a key role in the academic community. At the moment, she's editor-in-chief of Digital Society, and as previously co-lead with Phyllis Hillary, the European Journal for Philosophy of Science, that is one of the major journals in the field. And just very quickly on a personal note, I first met Federica when I was a PhD student, visiting her at the University of Amsterdam, where she was based at that time. And I must confess that she greatly inspired my work and shaped somehow my academic trajectory. So I'm truly grateful for her mentorship, her insights. So thank you very much, Federica, and thank you again for accepting our invitation. So please join me in warmly welcoming Federica. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the very nice introduction, Mattia, and to you, Irini, for the kind invitation. I'm very pleased to be today with you, although only online and not in person. I hope there will be other opportunities sometime soon. And I'm also very excited to be able to present research from the SOLARIS project that I am currently coordinated. We are now in our third year of the project, so we have another extra year ahead of us, but we do have quite some results, and some of these results are more theoretical and others are still kind of in the making. You will hear about it soon. Let me begin a bit with the motivation for this project that is actually quite common, and that has to do with the phenomenon of disinformation. And I say here in the title of the slides, moving from disinformation 2.0 from 3.0, because clearly there was disinformation well before we had digital technologies around. But digital technologies already changed somehow the landscape of how information circulates, and particularly social media have been extensively studied because they facilitated and amplified phenomena such as the micro-targeting, just to mention one. And here I would like to bring in terminology coming from the philosophy of information, and just mentioning how digital technologies have also created new ontological spaces, because through them we are on life and not just online, so to speak. But clearly, with the advent of generative AI, it looks like we are moving towards another important phase. And so the question is whether, to what extent, and what kind of divide is generative AI creating. Let me begin with some intuitive remarks about what is happening, not just in my view, but also coming out of discussions and collaborations within the consortium. And then I will try to substantiate and give them more philosophical depth. It seems to us that we are assisting to an important shift. And this shift has to do with the idea of interacting through versus interacting with technologies. So human agents, artifacts, the world, we always engage in some kind of relationship, but how interactions are shaped and how they change also depends on the type of technology. And to some extent, we could say that analog technologies and some digital technologies are instruments, artifacts that we interact through. There is an idea of instrumentality. For instance, we write with the pen, and the goal is to write something, and the pen is an instrument. You could also think bringing in literature from the philosophy of technology, the idea of mediation. These technologies mediate certain relationship between us, human agents, and the world. And you could also think of them, especially in the context of information and communication technologies, as instruments for delivering messages of some kind, but this goes back to a form of instrumentality. What is happening with this new class of technologies, generative AI especially, is that we interact increasingly more with the technology itself. So we have to bring in an idea of cooperation, and to some extent, this is happening through the easiness of communications that we have with these technologies through natural language. And so what we are observing is that we interact with these technologies as if they were human agents or human-like agents, or as much as possible like us. And again, language here is a key player in many respects. And so AI is really moving to the foreground of sociality. So if you find this intuitively, then hopefully you will be interested in how we can give these initial thoughts more philosophical depth, which you can find in an article recently published in Philosophy of Technology with the two colleagues from the same consortium. In this paper, we have advanced the view that socio-technical systems, which is a well-established conceptual term in science and technology studies, philosophy of technologies, and neighboring area, are actually becoming increasingly synthetic. And this is the term that I will explain further. So clearly, these systems are socio-technical in the sense that is usually understood. But as I just said, because the newest generation of technologies are able to interact with us in newer ways, then they start qualifying as social actors. Or if you want to bring in the terminology of Bruno Latour, they are actant, and they were probably actant even before, but now they are even more, they gained ground at the level of agency. They are taking on more social roles, and they also change social practices in various ways. This is why we dubbed these systems not just socio-technical, but also synthetic, because the border between the human and the artificial behavior and communication becomes blurred. Their functioning is clearly different from ours, but what is important to notice here is that, again, this attempt to mimic by and large our natural language plays a key role here. Now, large part of the project does not discuss or cover generative AI for textual elements, but more for audiovisual contents. But as you will see, there are many similarities, and the argument applies as well. To understand how these generative AI technologies are taking an important role in these systems, we have adopted what we have called a network approach to AI-generated content. So let me here shift more towards the AI generation of audiovisual content. And what is important here to notice is that although a lot of attention has been given, and I hope you can see my mouse moving, to the artifact itself, so the product or the deep fake, as it is often called, what we have been trying to call attention to is the fact that these deep fakes or the AI generated content more generally is part of a broader network that start with the generation and goes on with the distribution and then circulation and the reception of it. And within this network, we also have to understand where is the target of these deepfakes, what kind of role policy and legislative intervention also have, and what kind of public discourse is created. Now, what you can see here are actants, again, in the sense of Latour, but the point here is that these technologies are increasingly becoming agents in itself. Even more importantly, I would say we have to pay attention to the interactions. That's why I am highlighting here the arrows from one node to the other. And specifically in the following, I will be interested in on how these arrows make possible meaning making, so producing content and semantic content that is not anymore a prerogative of human agents, but this happens with the interaction of these technologies. So let me try and explain in more details what is changing at the level of meaning making. Here I go back, I go to a couple of steps back, introducing the concept of poiesis that I developed in my latest monograph. And what is interesting is that I made this argument having in mind specifically technoscientific practices and trying to push forward the idea that in science or in technoscience, if you want to put technology more prominently, it is not just the humans with their intelligence and ideas producing scientific knowledge, but we have to acknowledge the fundamental ways in which humans create contents with the instruments, once the idea of poiesis. So here the idea is that human and artificial epistemic agents produce knowledge, which is to begin with an epistemic point. Knowledge production not being just something that we can attribute or that humans do, but technologies, environment, materiality, and embodiment, all these aspects are essential elements. So if we acknowledge this in technoscientific context, well, now it is all the more so in even everyday uses of these technologies. What is also very important for me is to stress the fact that although I started thinking of this concept of poiesis as primarily an epistemic point, there are really important implications at the level of normativity and ethics, implications for design, regulation, governance, and also rethinking responsibility in the light of this idea of co-production. And co-production can happen in a number of ways. Now, the primary example that we will have in mind are large language models and how we can use them for various purposes: text, speech, image, videos. All these modes of co-production point to this concept of poiesis that I just evoked. I'm happy to give you more details about this concept of poiesis if you want, but now I would like to move on to more related aspects of the project. And perhaps before I explain how we are exploiting this idea in the context of project activities, it is also important to emphasize that clearly large language models remain statistical parrots, to use the metaphor that has become so widespread. The point here is not that they are able to genuinely create original thinking. At the same time, they still generate content. And it is through this generation that we also participate in the production of semantic content, not just on their own, but together with us. And this is where I find the idea of shared responsibility and perhaps also of morality really important, because we have to understand also how we are inducing certain forms of dissemination perhaps, and of production of certain semantic content. So to explain in some more detail what we are doing in the project and how we are exploiting this network idea, our first use case has focused on the on how users, average users, come to believe AI-generated audiovisual contents. We have been trying to measure the perceived trustworthiness of this AI-generated content. Our hypothesis, in line with this network approach that I just sketched, is that it is not just the quality of the audiovisual content that explains how we come to believe or trust this content, but there is a whole network that makes it more credible than just its quality. So here we have set up empirical research to come up with a psychometric scale for AI perceived trustworthiness. We have produced 6 videos on 2 main topics, climate change and immigration. We chose these 2 topics because they remain timely and important across kind of various populations and nations as well. But at the same time, we didn't want to get into too sensitive and political content, such as the war in Ukraine or in Gaza. And what we have done, and this is also part of the development of the project, is through a platform manipulate videos in a way that we could alter the content, so the credibility of the source or even the information given, and also the presentation at the level of mouth movement and video quality. I'm going to share you something to you in a moment. And so starting from a real video with positive or negative attitudes, we produced 1 high quality AI generated content and 1 low quality AI generated content. And this was done on purpose because we wanted, as I said, to put under test our hypothesis that it's not just the quality of the video determining how we come to trust the content. So here, for instance, I can show you a few seconds of these videos. This one, and I hope you can hear it, this is the original one with Greta Thunberg giving one of her speeches.
Now is the time to speak clearly. Solving the climate crisis is the greatest and most complex challenge that Homo sapiens has ever.
So, could you hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this is the original one. Now, for instance, this is a low quality one that we created. So that means that on purpose, we put kind of lower the realization.
Climate change nonsense. The hoax cooked up by those who want to control us and take our hard-earned money.
this is clearly a fake. We have generated the contents of the speech, and also the video in itself is of low quality, because if you look closely at it, then you will notice, for instance, small mistakes in how lips are synchronized, or there will be odd things in the background. I mean, you could watch it and spot these things. And this is instead, the last one that I'm going to show you briefly, also is AI generated with the content, kind of the speech in line with what Greta Thunberg would say, but the quality of the video is actually better.
Are sitting in front of the Swedish parliament blocking its entrances to deny climate justice. For decades, activists and scientists have warned about the catastrophic consequences of a continued
Okay, so a few comments on this. When we started the project, generative adversarial networks were still pretty much a niche. So I'm really talking about 2 years ago. And by the time the project started, there was way more available in terms of the technologies to create these videos. And now it is not an exaggeration to say that you could create these videos on your phone in a few minutes if you are savvy enough at the level of tech. Not me, that's why we have technical partners to help us creating these videos, but they are clearly way easier to generate. So the understanding what this deep fake, what AI generated context can make as an impact is not the future, it is really the present. Sorry, okay, I should go back to this. Oops, sorry, this is, I'm messing this up. Oops, this is all going all over the places. Let me change the slide with this. And let me go back to this for a moment. What we asked participants were the following questions: whether the video was real and why, whether the participants find the video trustworthy, okay, whether they thought the video was aligned with the individual's general political orientation, and whether they promote positive or negative attitudes towards the issue, and also whether they would further share the video, okay. So here I'm hoping, okay. And here I'm going to give you a primer on what we are finding out through the results. We have already completed the collection from data coming from the United Kingdom. Data from Slovenia and Italy is still ongoing, but we have already enough to say something about it. Worth noting, only about 1/3 of the participants have successfully detected high-quality deepfakes, okay? And only about half recognized low-quality deepfakes. About 33% of our participants expressed that they would share the high-quality deepfake on social media, and about 30% would share the low-quality deepfake on social media. So what becomes here worrisome is on both ends of the spectrum. You know, a good deepfake is recognizable, but still people would share it, and then you may raise concern about responsibility of sharing AI generated content, even if it is in line with the political or normative views expressed by the target, let's say. But also worrisome is how we are still not so good in in detecting low quality deepfakes. And through the qualitative part of the study, what is becoming clear is that what may explain tendencies to share this content on our network is, for instance, where it comes from. we have identified, and this is not very surprising, of course, is that a protective factor is actually media literacy. But of course, we may want to ask how many people are literate enough, not only to get the detection right, but also to exercise judgment and not share these contents, irrespective of whether they the AI generated content is in line rather than opposed to the potentially intended message of the target. So the network approach that we have developed as a theoretical framework really suggests that we cannot just focus on the quality of the audiovisual content that is AI generated to establish when we have to worry that these things will get out of our hands. They probably are already, and this is a bit kind of outside the study, but a part of conversations we are having within the consortium and with a number of stakeholders. It looks like part of the worry, and this is why the project was also funded, came from the potential impacts on democratic process, as if these things may be largely disruptive of big geopolitical equilibrium. And what we have observed is that clearly AI and generative AI has had already a role in all the elections that took place in the past few months. And many commentators and journalists rightly mentioned that 2024 was a crucial year in this respect. Clearly so. But we haven't seen, or not yet, the Third World War kind of happening because of a deepfake. At the same time, these technologies, and especially because they are becoming so easy to access and use, they may threat everyday social interactions. And especially what we are finding out about our inability to detect the deepfake should be an alarm bell for how we use them, even just for fun, if you see what I mean. Now, the second use case that we have in the project, this is currently in the making and will be carried out in May, has to do with the circulation of AI generated content. And about the mitigation measures. We will run a simulation with journalists and a number of other media platforms to understand what kind of safeguards are in place on their end to prevent that they are the spreaders of deepfakes, but also how they react in case something, a deepfake, becomes viral. So this will aim to put under test mitigation measures and the regulatory framework that we have in place at European level and in specific national context. We also hope to be able to test some tools for quasi-real-time detection of deepfakes based on Google Trends and how you can statistically examine peaks of co-occurring of keywords circulating on social media, but this is very much in progress, and we are also seeking collaboration with sister projects working on germane topics. And the third use case, instead, focusing also on the public discourse and circulation, here looks at whether there can be good use of these technologies. We are in the process of organizing workshops with citizens to co-create AI-generated contents that convey positive and constructive messages. Now, we are fully aware that what positive and constructive or good means is contentious and debatable, and this is part of what we also want to examine in these activities with citizens. But just to give you an idea, one could imagine creating an AI-generated video of Marie Curie promoting STEM education, and so in this way, hopefully having more women enrolling into STEM programs. You know, this is the type of idea that we have. And some uses of these technologies are already in place, but for us it will be interesting to work with the citizens also to understand their perception. So this is also activities for us in the coming couple of months. So I hope I will be able to report back on the results of these activities soon. So let me now move on to the challenges ahead. One clear challenge has to do with regulatory efforts. And depending on where you stand, you may have different views on how much the AI Act actually manages to achieve. But clearly, the European Union is at the forefront of thinking about regulation in the area. At the level of the project, we have two papers in the making. One that is actually just submitted that tries to reconceptualize trust, again from this network perspective, showing and giving more substance to the idea that you cannot just use the terminology of trust in AI or trustworthy AI, abstracting from the whole network that produces not just the artifact, but also the circulation and disseminations of these outputs. And the consequences are clearly important beyond the semantic of the concept of trust, because there is a spillover effect. If you can enlarge this network of trust, then you can regain responsibility and possibly liability of actors around the artifact. We have a second paper in the making, which is way more challenging, because we are acknowledging that there is also literature fundamentally criticizing this idea of trust and trustworthy AI, because trust is a notion that really belongs to the human-human relationship. It is rooted in these human-to-human interactions, and so you cannot extend this. And so through contributions in philosophical anthropology and trying to understand trust via analogy and as an extension of human-human trust, we are trying to see whether and to what extent we could still keep the term while highlighting its problematic application that comes especially from a legal perspective. So here we hope to contribute to the debate on trustworthy AI, giving kind of more solid foundations to the term. Unsurprisingly, what is clearly key is literacy. Whether you want to frame it as digital media or AI literacy, we have to ask the question, what plans are in place to keep citizens and the general public with the basics, so that they understand enough of how LLMs and generative AI work, how they spread content, how we spread content with them, And what seems to us at the level of the consortium is that an interesting question is where literacy interventions should take place. With this idea in mind, we organized a couple of weeks ago an event at the European Parliament, again, kind of focusing on the online circulation, user reception, and public discourse area of our network, and debating whether effective strategies for AI literacy program could be displaced from their obvious locations. There is a lot that is already happening, for instance, in schools. There is a lot that we can think of in terms of engaging citizens. But what if we were able to put a kind of material and give messages in places that are non-obvious, a kind of out of the box that wakes up the attention of citizens? And one idea could be that in the places of the health and well-being, there could be information and literacy action about AI and generative AI. Why displacing? Well, because we have to capture as many individuals and groups as possible. And there is something to be said about minorities and vulnerable groups. They may still kind of get outside the radar if we only focus on the usual places for literacy intervention. So this is hopefully to be followed up. But again, and this is the idea of the network comeback. Before, I was highlighting the arrows to explain how we make meaning with the generative AI. And now in the network, I want to highlight the nodes. This information can be addressed at different joints, and this is also why it is crucial, it seems to us, to have a broader perspective on deepfakes, generative AI, and these technologies in general. Because if you only focus, say, on the artifact, and for instance on regulating the artifact and its generation in itself, you are likely to miss out other nodes that are actually actionable. Okay. We hope we will be able to develop these initial thoughts in more depth when we draft the policy recommendations. But clearly there is an important discourse to be made related to empowerment, especially for citizenship, working at the level of self-awareness, helping individuals, and here I try to stay general because this question can mean slightly different things depending if you are a young, an adult, a professional, or an elderly person. What is your role in the infosphere, and what kind of network do you have? You really have to work on the self-awareness of where you stand, and therefore also how you use these tools. It will be never enough to plead for caution in spreading contents on social media, because as our empirical research has shown, we are likely to share false and misleading information even if our intentions are good. And so also work at the level of proactiveness, how we can make our close environment more kind of safer, is an important question that we have to ask. And to this, although this is less debated, it seems to me at the moment, has to do with argumentation skills. How are we able to judge the quality and the source of information enough. And here I would like to kind of to throw a stone in the pond, asking about the responsibility of journalism in the era, in the media in the era of AI. Because one reason why we are posing so much attention to AI-generated contents and the challenges of deepfake is because visuals have acquired so much value. What has been described also as the attention economy and psychology that is at the basis of platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, and you name it, really works at this level. But how about rediscovering the power of arguments, which requires as well slowing down the pace at which we share information, but not just we share, but we also consume ourselves the information. So this kind of goes back to giving more prominence, powers, and importance to arguments, text. But of course, now that we can so easily generate text through AI, this acquires another layer of complexity. But perhaps this is something again that is worth discussing again with stakeholders that have a key role in this business. All right. I hope I was able to give you an overview of what is happening in this project, from activities that are at various stages of completion to some kind of deeper philosophical intuitions and motivations, and as well as arguments for this project. I'm very happy that I am in this role because as a philosopher of science and technology myself, it is a rare, I would say, unique opportunity to show the value of humanities in the development of these activities. And I will be more than happy to take any questions now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Federica. Now we have some time for Q&A. Any questions here in the room or even online, maybe?
There is a question online that we can start from that. I will just read it out loud for everyone. So Sarah is asking, how do you think about intertwining the epistemological and normative aspects of your own research practice? How did your research team, for example, discuss generating deepfake audio-video materials together with Greta Thunberg? And in what ways did you ensure that she could express her informed consent to your project?
Thanks. Excellent question. We spent really a lot of time discussing the how to do this part of the research. So on the one hand, several things. We have an ethics advisory board with whom we discussed this part of the project several points in time. We also consulted legal experts to make sure that we did not need special consent from Greta Thunberg or Orban in this case, and apparently that is so because we are conducting research, so it falls outside kind of the limitations of the AI Act. At the same time, the platform that we developed for the generation of these videos is not accessible outside the consortium, and it will never be. So there has been a conversation about how to ensure this technically. Clearly, participants from the consortium, they have to adhere to a strict code of conduct, and this platform will not exploited at the end of the project in any possible way. And as you can see, we make a disclaimer about the origin of these videos, and every time we can. So this is how we are handling the project. We found ourselves in a difficult position because there is, of course, a risk that this content created for the purpose of research, they are misused. But we hope we have done as much as we could to prevent this.
Thanks. I think Stana also here in the first.
Yeah, thank you for a very interesting talk. One is more technical questions. I was wondering, I was interested in this variable or notion of media literacy that you mentioned. So I was wondering how you captured that, or on based on what you kind of interpreted that it could be a moderator of the relationship. And then I was wondering because as it's stated now, the AI Act is categorizing deepfakes as the limited risk category, and this will involve that for them, or this involves transparency requirements. So providers and deployers of deepfakes need to assign them as such. I wanted to hear your thoughts because do you think are you satisfied with this approach? I've seen your results, right? Do you personally think that this will be enough for the audience of such videos to detect and also to kind of contain the possible negative effects of such videos, right? Because there are many things that play into this that, for example, media literacy, but also the acceptance of misinformation is by some been related to educational levels. How do we promote AI literacy or the literacy to understand this type of images, also with a disclaimer, without expanding a gap between those who already are kind of competent with these type of technologies and also can access this type of information. I don't know, there was a lot in there. Feel free to, I would be happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, there was a lot in the question, so let me try to pick up a few elements, and correct me if I misunderstood also, because the sound was at time not so good, so I hope I didn't miss bits here and there. Let me begin with the AI Act. It has been a concern for us that these are placed in the AI Act in the low-risk technologies. It seems to us that this is incorrect. And we hope to be able to say something quite substantial towards the end of the project when we draft the policy recommendation. We have also started discussing whether measures such as the transparency of the having a disclaimer would be enough, and we don't have the results of these discussions, but I think it is safe to anticipate that these are not enough. So maybe we need stronger regulation. At the same time, regulation is only one side of the coin here, and perhaps it's not even a coin with two sides, but a prism with multiple facets. So one is the regulation, the other one is literacy that you also mentioned in your question and in your comment. We haven't worked on the literacy aspect yet, although we are anticipating how much this will have to play a role, and it has been a an incredibly important point discussed in this event a few weeks ago at the Parliament, that we have to be very, very careful with the literacy program, precisely because, as you suggest, we may not be able to reach out to certain people. We may indeed create a wider divide with certain literacy interventions. So the project as is now does not have positive answers to offer to you, other than acknowledging that these questions have to be on the table. On a personal note, I am particularly worried about especially the individual use of these technologies, and especially when this individual use is done without zero understanding of what they are and what they can do, which basically happens to the average person. So this goes back to the words of caution, but I think it also goes back to what, in my view, is a misclassification in the AI Act. Please let me know if I left out important elements in your question, and I will try to address them.
I think this was it was good. I think, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Okay. Any other question coming? Ale?
Yeah, hi Federica. Many thanks for the amazing talk, and it's really nice to hear where you stand with your project and also with your thinking. And I really didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to ask you something on the philosophical, or rather STS aspects of your work in the recent years. So we're also starting to do some work on AI agency. First of all, because it makes a lot of sense to interpret AI as an agent with a behavior, also from a regulatory point of view. But I wanted to ask you something about A&T. So the fact that you are embracing this way of analyzing technologies after network theory, and it makes a lot of sense, because it means recognizing the poietic nature of AI that is very apparent, but it's not necessarily the only methodological option to go about it. And so my question is more about your use and your understanding of co-production. And I was curious to know whether you are using this notion as a way to stress the fact that human and non-human actors or actants produce semantic content together, meaning that, I mean, semantic content or whatever else, I mean, predictions or health outcomes, whatever AI is employed to do, or whether maybe you are more interested in understanding AI itself as producing at the same time facts and meaning on the one end, and social orders around those facts and meanings. I mean, you mentioned the political use of AI as capable of having a tangible political influence on society. So I was wondering where you stand on your understanding of co-production, and also the second point that I would raise is whether your understanding of co-production has to do with understanding AI as an artifact with politics, so something that is political through and through, and if so, whether this understanding, what do you do with it in terms of philosophy of information, in terms of really understanding that this political character of AI is human-made? So in a sense, it flips the understanding of AI as itself a poietic agent or actant, and forces us to recognize that it is made in this way by humans. So I would be glad to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question that gives me the opportunity to do my work as a philosopher. So, okay. when I started developing this idea of poiesis and co-production, AI and generative AI was not a big thing as it is now. And I was trying to react to established literature, especially in philosophy of science, that has neglected too much the role of instruments in the production of scientific results. Okay, so I was pushing for this idea that we co-produce pretty much anything in science, and of course there is a spectrum from a minimal writing with the pen to indeed having an algorithm that is able to detect a protein structure. Okay, then you have to understand the differences across this spectrum. But I wanted to draw attention to the fact that these instruments are really part and parcel of this process of knowledge production. Now, I pushed for calling them agents, having in mind a very minimal notion of agency that I borrowed from the philosophy of information, where these things, the moment they interact, basically, they satisfy some minimal requirements, and especially not requiring that they have a form of intentionality. And clearly, some people, especially from moral and political philosophy, more in the old guard, may have reservations about this move. But I have a reason for that. Now, even the notion of agency is something that you can modulate, and you could require and ascribe more or less agency depending of where you are in the spectrum, but also about the normative implications. Okay. So you could at some point say, for the case of generative AI, because it is becoming so high in agency, and there may be a point in which it gets out of our control, that normatively you want to reduce or control or constrain its forms of agencies. Okay, and this is where I think comes another point of your question about the politics and our human involvement. I don't think we have considered enough or anticipate enough what may happen with these things. So I don't want to block innovation in science and technology, definitely not, but delivering to the outside world a powerful tool such as all the LLMs that we can manipulate on our phone, this is to me irresponsible, to put it very, very bluntly. Okay? And so this is where ethics of research should come in. We know we cannot anticipate all possible consequences, but here it seems to me that we have made zero effort in anticipate any of these consequences. And this is where I think it is important to recognize how much agency they have, and even if they remain statistical parrots in the case of LLMs, or they remain in part dependent on our prompts for the generation of audiovisual contents, still they generate something that we semantically interpret and then redistribute. So at that level, it doesn't really matter if they always require some input from us or whether it is totally autonomous. It is already out there. So there is already an important political dimension. And this is all the more so because some uses are perceived as innocuous or neutral, such as using an LLM for generating a summary. Summaries are not a neutral semantic tools. We use this example in the paper submitted related to trust and the network approach. Suppose this is the example that you use. Suppose you had to vote for Brexit and you wanted to have a summary of what are the pros and cons, and you ask ChatGPT to do a summary for you. How can you safely assume that the summary you get from an LLM trained on anything and just picking out stuff from the big melting pot that it kind of gets the input from, based on your prompt, will give you an authoritative, neutral. No, it doesn't. Okay, so politics to me is there involved from point zero until the very, very end, and that's where the recognizing their agency is essential to make decision about how we want to deal with this agency, including saying we should stop it. I mean, this is the most extreme, and we do not want that in all cases. But I think we should discuss it in a more systematic way. I hope it answers your question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Federica. I think our time is over. I want to just raise a quick comment. So I really like this project because, I mean, it's clear, at least to me, that I know Federica's work, that, I mean, a very strong, refined theoretical framework has shaped and driven the entire project. So I'm also curious to see whether the results, let's say, of the empirical part of the project can help you to refine, let's say, the theoretical framework behind that. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I don't know whether you want to close with the last comment on that.
Thank you so much for this comment, Mattia. I also find this perhaps from a personal perspective the most interesting part of the project, of how the theoretical framework is really relevant to inform the activities, the policies, but then we have to go back to the framework. And this perhaps ties back to what I didn't say just in the answer before, that the ANT framework is useful to the extent that you are also able to refining at kind of adapted for other tools. But yeah, I am super grateful for this opportunity. I really thank you for all the interesting questions, and I hope we have an opportunity to discuss again the projects and these themes together.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Bye bye.
Ciao.